Mr. Chair, and it's a pleasure to take my first call on this bill. First call, that's right, on this bill, which is a very important bill, as my colleague Shane Jones has just stated. We are talking here about people in our system who play both a very important ceremonial role, and I think most of us are very aware of the ceremonial role of the Governor-General, but also, as we know, a constitutional role that, while controversial for many in this House, is no doubt important. And I think, Mr. Chair, when I look at Part 1 of this bill, what it says to me is that democracy is not cheap. And I think when we look at this bill, we work our way through the clauses in it. We see that there is a range of costs associated with being Governor-General, and that's as it should be, because if we are going to have somebody in our society who is the head of state, they have, as I say, a ceremonial role which takes them all over New Zealand, all over the world, representing New Zealand and New Zealanders, as well as undertaking their constitutional role. It's very important that we are able to resource that well. But it's also, Mr. Chair, one of the criticisms levelled at republicanism is that there'll be all this cost associated with moving to a republic. But I think what this bill actually shows us is that there's plenty of cost involved in being the Governor-General. I mean, if we look, for instance, at clauses 6 and 7 and 8, there we will begin looking at what the allowance of the Governor-General is. And as I say, the allowance is quite reasonable that somebody should be paid to undertake this role, but it is expensive, Mr. Chair. And then the annuity for former Governors-General, which I think is something that Mr. Jones just mentioned before, it is perhaps sometimes hard for people to see why somebody who is a former undertakes this role and then is in another role in life is being paid, but it is a recognition of the status of the role. And I certainly respect what Keith Locke had to say in his intervention about whether or not the references in clause 11 to chauffeur-driven cars is appropriate in an egalitarian New Zealand. I think sometimes the phrase chauffeur-driven car is, with all due respect to ministerial services and VIP drivers, sort of makes it a little bit bigger than it really is. It is in fact the service that is given to ministers, and I in fact in this case respect the fact that former Governors-General will have the continuing respect of New Zealand society by being able to have that particular travel service provided to them. But it is true that what this bill shows us is that it isn't cheap for us to retain the form of democracy that we've got. And we need to acknowledge that openly here in the House and say that what this bill is actually about, and Part 1 in particular of this bill is about recognising those costs and putting them in an orderly way. And so from that point of view, I'm certainly a strong supporter of the idea that the Governor-General, after this bill passes, will be paying some form of taxation. If it's good enough for the Queen, then it's good enough for the Governor-General. If it's good enough for Dr Prasad, then it's good enough for the Governor-General. If it's good enough for me, it's good enough for the Governor-General. I'm not sure about some of the National Party's mates and whether or not they're all paying tax, but if it's good enough for the Governor-General to do it, I hope that they'll be looking around and talking to some of their perhaps wealthy benefactors and making sure that they do take the opportunity to pay their tax as well. But the role of the Governor-General, Mr. Chair, is protected in this bill, but I want to refer specifically to some clauses that I don't think have had much discussion so far today, and that's around the Governor-General's program, and that's clauses 13 and 14. And in particular, the notion that the Governor-General's essentially now being de-linked from the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet. Because certainly up to this time, the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet has had a key role in overseeing the Governor-General's office. And that, I guess, came about, Mr. Chair, as a result of people trying to find a place to locate the Governor-General, given that they stand a little outside the constitutional outside the normal departmental framework, And so it is now clear from the bill that's in front of us that the Governor-General's program is now being de-linked from the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet. This, I think, is something that perhaps the Minister would want to take a call on, to be absolutely clear for us on what will now occur when the Governor-General's program is separated out. This actually puts a great deal more responsibility on the Governor-General's staff and on the officers that support the Governor-General to ensure that they are in fact continuing to operate in line with all of the things that we would expect from a public office like this. The Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet's been able to play that role of linking people in with the service of the government, and I think it's important that that can continue in one form or another. So perhaps the Minister might like to tell us how that would occur. Well, Mr Chair, I think it's Mr Chair. Mr Chair. I call the Honourable Trevor.